In this session, our focus is embedded skill development to support critical inquiry. Most curriculum outcomes have a content dimension, indicating the knowledge we want students to acquire, and a skill dimension, indicating the thinking and inquiry abilities we hope to develop. Integrating the teaching of the skill dimension with the content dimension enhances students' understanding and increases their ability to think and learn more effectively. Embedded skill development involves 3 steps: creating frequent opportunities to develop skills, teaching specific thinking tools to build competence in each skill, and supporting students in using their thinking tools independently without teacher prompting. Let's explore each of these steps. We create opportunities for skill development by selecting an appropriate skill as the entry point or opportunity for inquiry into the content dimension we want students to learn. Here are some examples where students develop the ability to interpret ideas while deepening their understanding of changing conditions during the 20th century. In the earlier grades, we might focus on interpreting ideas using images to teach about changes in community housing and transportation practices. Students might identify differences in various photographs of a local community and then use this information to arrange the images in chronological order. When interpreting ideas with older students, we might focus on statistical charts and graphs to identify differences in employment over time. The key to selecting effective opportunities is to identify a skill that suits the desired content focus for that lesson, but it must also match the teaching resources at our disposal. If we couldn't find employment statistics in our classroom resources or from an online government site, we might teach about these practices by comparing historical documents or newspapers from various periods. The next important consideration is to teach the thinking tools, the concepts, criteria, and strategies that will help students develop competence in the desired skill. Suppose we wanted students to learn about changing historical communities around the time of the forced expulsion of Acadians by the British in the 18th century. We might use this as an opportunity to develop skill in interpreting textual information by asking students to identify the British demands imposed upon the Acadians. With older students, a suitable source for this information might be the Oath of Allegiance that the British pressured Acadians to sign in 1717. But what thinking tools might help students identify the key ideas contained in this historical document? We might introduce or review the difference between a main idea and supporting details. A helpful strategy is to select a portion of the text and invite students to circle the key words or phrases and to cross out minor details. Students might then practice rewriting the statements in their own words, making sure they clearly capture all the key points and none of the minor details. We might encourage students to share their statements with other students to help reinforce their own understanding of the demands imposed on the Acadians. At this point, it might occur to you to ask, where do we find the thinking tools that students will need to become competent at a particular skill? In many cases, the thinking tools to support skill development are identified in the curriculum. Comparing comparable skill descriptions from one grade level to the next helps to identify the additional tools and complexity that is expected. For example, helping students learn to formulate thoughtful opinions might involve teaching the following basic thinking tools in the early grades: understanding the concepts of pro and con reasons, identifying obvious reasons for and against, deciding on the conclusion that is best supported by the reasons. At the intermediate level, we might expect students to identify several reasons, not just the obvious ones, and to assess the plausibility of each reason before trying to reach an open-minded or unbiased conclusion. By the senior level, students might be expected to identify reasons from various perspectives and to assess not only the plausibility of their reasons, but also their relative importance. The last consideration in embedding skill development is ensuring that students learn to use the thinking tools independently without prompting and constant direction from the teacher. To ensure this, we must gradually increase the extent to which students apply and monitor their use of the tools on their own. We can encourage this transfer of responsibility in 4 stages. Introduce a thinking tool and explain why it's useful. Model the application of the thinking tool using a simple example. Guide students in practicing use of the thinking tool with timely teacher and peer feedback. Encourage students to assume responsibility for ongoing use of the thinking tool without being asked to do so. So what have we learned? We have illustrated how skill development can be successfully embedded into the teaching of outcomes by creating frequent opportunities to develop skills, teaching specific thinking tools to build competence in each skill, and supporting students in learning to use the thinking tools independently without teacher prompting. We hope this session and others in this series will help you focus on critical inquiry.